I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Today's episode has been sponsored by Pediatrician in Your Pocket at dr-jen.com. Dr. Jennifer Trachtenberg is a mother of 3 and a 20-plus year pediatrician, board certified, who has culled all of her amazing advice and made a series of 5-minute videos on everything from feeding and sleeping to safety and all types of parenting issues, which basically every parent out there can use, especially in the middle of the night when you can't reach your pediatrician. So this is like a must do, and she's offering a discount to everyone with code PIP20. PIP20 is the code to get 20% off of all of her modules. So definitely go to dr-jen.com and check it out. It's also on a link in my website too, zibbyowens.com. I'm excited to be here today with both the authors of The Woman in the Park. Teresa Sorkin and Tullan Holmqvist are co-authors of both the novel and the screenplay for The Woman in the Park. Tullan is an investigator, writer, and actress. Originally from Sweden, Tullan has a master's degree in political science from the University of Florence, with literature and language degrees from universities in France and Italy. She has also studied screenwriting and acting at NYU and BU. She currently lives in New York with her husband and 2 sons. Teresa Sorkin is a TV producer and founder of Roman Way Productions, a graduate of New York University and Bocconi University of Milan. Teresa started as a journalist for RAI TV, for which she hosted her own show. She currently lives in New York with her husband and 2 children. So welcome, Teresa and Tullan. Thanks for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Thank you for having us. We love the podcast, so we're so excited.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm like deep in my head in The Woman in the Park, having just finished it. So I'm like really eager to talk to you about it. Okay, can you tell listeners, please, what The Woman in the Park is about?
Well, it's a psychological thriller about a woman who is in her 40s and sort of dealing with a new stage of life. And she meets a man in the park one day and her life sort of unravels and there's lots of mystery, but it's also mystery of who she is as a person. And we slowly find that out as the book goes on, which is hard to say too much because there's a lot of things you want to find out because it's sort of twists and things like that. And
so maybe it's a mix between a whodunit and who am I?
That's a nice
a psychological component, which we really wanted to bring out this woman in the middle of her life, and it's set in New York, so the park is Central Park. So as many ask, what park is it?
Yes, I recognized many. Like, which playground are they talking about? So how did you two find each other, and how did you decide to embark on this project?
Well, we met in the park, actually.
Yes.
No way.
We did.
We're moms at the same school, the Italian school, in this area, actually, where the book is set. And I live in that area, too, so it's a very familiar place.
We spent a lot of days where our children played in that park, and both Tullan and I are, so I'm a TV film producer and writer, and Tullan's a writer, a screenwriter, and actor. And so we were collaborating, an investigator. That's an important part, private investigator. And we were just basically thought we'd work on something together, and we were working on something else. And then the story sort of came to us one day.
Well, tell me more about that. How did it come to you? Tell me about that. Where did it come from?
We talked a lot about, ourselves and how we connected. And I think we both connect. We're both very empathetic and can feel a lot. And it's kind of at this stage in your life when you have kids and this woman, Sarah Rock, she's married, she has 2 kids, and the kids are getting a little bit older. They're time to move on in some ways. And you kind of find yourself looking at your own life and who am I? What did I want to do? Where do I want to go? And you're kind of at a different stage in life, but you're still the same person inside in some ways, but in other ways not. So it was kind of, and there was actually a woman that we used to see in the park that kind of sparked our imagination, let's put it. That was the seed. And she was always alone, by herself.
She was alone in the park, beautiful, blonde, woman. And we just started to, both of us, imagine what her story would be, what she was really doing. She was there quite often, and
we had different versions, actually, what we thought. So that was like, oh, this is interesting, because, and one of us thought, oh, she's talking to herself. The other one thought she was on the phone. And we saw her all the time. And it was just this kind of very different. She seemed to maybe not know who she was or where she was. And it was just an interesting, what if that were me? What if I don't really know what,
And then I have a good friend who's the head of Bellevue Hospital for 25 years. His name is Dr. Samoon Ahmed. So we started asking him questions about what a certain disorder would look like in that space, and what if this woman had something like that. So we did a lot of case study research to really get the psychological component perfect, because we didn't want to, make it seem frivolous or just brush upon it. It needed to really feel real for us. So, yeah.
Was Teresa Sorkin one of your favorite books? How did that, Emile Zola, it was scattered at the beginning of every chapter. You had a little quote, and it coursed throughout the book. How did you pick that?
So I love Teresa Sorkin. It's one of my favorite all-time thrillers ever, because it's about, again, this madness and this thriller. Like, 'cause for me and for Tullan, when we were discussing it, is that sometimes just the thrilling, like what's going on inside of you is so much more scary than what's actually happening outside. And with Teresa Sorkin, that was happening quite a bit. And so we really wanted her to have something that she would go back to, and we tied in a lot of her imagination with what was happening in the book and the characters. And
it's kind of like a mirror to her
Yes.
story in some ways, and that's kind of she goes to the park to read, so that is the kind of the anchor that brings her, that follows along the whole story.
And you talked a lot about when Sarah's sitting outside Central Park, where she used to play with her kids, and her character, she's feeling a little bit sad, a little piece of melancholy as she's sitting there. And you say she reflects how, I'm quoting, she remembered those days fondly, and she had felt a slight pang of jealousy as she had once also had so much hope, so much engagement with her life. The kids had needed her, Eric had needed her, life had been so busy, so full. She'd taken it for granted that it would always feel that way. And now, ... So did you draw on your own experience, or how old are your kids? Or is this from a place of, personal experience, or how you imagine this time of life might be?
I think we both have definitely, we've talked about this a lot. There's a kind of, when the kids are very small, you're such a full and intense life, and you're kind of like, almost you want to get out of that stage, but then it shifts so quickly. My kids are a little bit younger than Teresa's.
Yeah.
I have a 12-year-old and a few more weeks, who's going to be 8.
I think I drew upon the sadness more because my kids are a bit older. My son's 16 and my daughter's 13. So it's sort of when they're little and you're in the park and you're living in the moment a lot more than when they get older. As they get older, you're living not as much in the moment because you're planning, well, they're going to have to go to college, and then what? And that's, in the park, it's the moment. Are they going to fall? Or they're playing? You're talking to your friend. It's really sort of, I would say, hold on to those moments because they're so precious and special. And then it does become a little sad. It's exciting to think your children are successful and they're moving on and they're doing wonderful things. But it is sad to think that, they won't be there for you to take to the park as you did once upon a time. So that was, I think, more me in the moment today as, and you in the future, maybe.
I think it's the nature of human beings. I mean, it is constant change, and we have different phases in life. So, and there's always the light and the dark and good things and bad things. But with kids, it's true when they're small, it's so, you have to be in the moment. You can't really be anywhere else because it's always ever changing. But then you want them to go on and live their lives. But it's an adjustment, I think, as a parent.
You said on this topic, no, in the book, no one had ever told her, meaning Sarah, that being a parent involves so much loss, all that significance a child would never understand, so wonderful and frightful at the same time. And then you go on to say about the playground area, how it was no place for adults without children, even those who had once been mothers. And I thought that was so interesting because are you not a mother when your kids go away? Or can you not maintain that identity? Do you know what I mean? Can you not call yourself a mother? I mean, what do you think?
I think for Sarah, she felt that way because we wanted her to really emphasize this feeling of she lost that ability to be a mother. For me, myself, obviously you're a mother forever, and they need you no matter what, even when they're, 35 and it's a different stage and a different place. But Sarah is in this space of who is she? And she's not this, she's not that. She's experienced loss and trauma of some sort and she feels that has been taken away from her as well, which we learn later on why and what the impetus for that was. But no, it's more her and her reflection of her mind, really. And
I think it was also, the way we felt about this particular, it was kind of like, there's so much love that instant that you become a mom or a dad, I'm sure it's the same. There's so much love, but there's also so much fear that is born with it in the same moment that you didn't even know that you had. I definitely discovered parts of myself that I didn't know existed, and it's in both for the good and the bad. But it's an interesting thing to ponder.
Before I had kids, I would jump out of a plane, no problem. It was like, right. What? Jump off a cliff in Capri? Okay, let's do it. Now I'm like, oh my God, I can't even do anything without worrying. They're going to not have a mother if I die. So it's just your whole world changes in that instant. And so it's interesting. And we wanted her to be vulnerable because I think a lot of people don't get it. They see these beautiful women who seem to have it all and everything seems perfect. And meanwhile, it's never perfect. No one has no fear.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like I alternate my worrying between something happening to a child of mine or something happening to me.
Exactly.
Right? Which is, anyway, what would they do without, they would be fine eventually without, they would be fine. But still, I'm like, how could, I have to be so careful with me and I have to be so careful with them because God forbid, could I even, anyway. It's my own neuroses. I could go on.
Everyone's
neuroses. It's like you need suddenly a new method of how you steer your mind to the positive and not
and again,
drown
live
in that
the
worry.
And live in the moment. It's hard to do that as a mother, but as a human being in general. But as a mother, it's even harder to just live in that moment without all the what ifs.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been experimenting with deciding not to worry about certain things and seeing if I can actually do that.
I do the same.
I had this flight that it had to be on time or it would be a big mess if I was late. And I was like, it's going to be fine. I'm not going to worry about it. I can't worry about it. I just can't. And I didn't. And it worked out. And I was like, wait, is this the answer? Is it that simple? This health scare, is it going to be good news or bad news? I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be fine. And it was fine. So I don't know.
Great.
I don't know. I'm experimenting.
It's wisdom to know when you can change things and when you can't.
Exactly.
And when you can't, there's no point really. But it's hard. It takes training.
It takes training. And then it might backfire because I could have easily missed that plane.
I think children are such a learning. They teach us so much, the whole experience. So it's, if you'd see it in that way, I think it's then it's the joy of life somehow.
My heart went out to your character, Sarah, and I felt like there's so many moments I could relate to with her. In the beginning, she's looking in the mirror, sort of assessing herself and her aging. And what mom our age has not had a moment where they're like, oh my gosh. Anyway, and she's looking at her body and saying, is that why I'm so upset? Is it my aging body or the wrinkles or whatever else? And says, was that really the problem? No, she could hide those changes under her clothes. Her eyes were the real difference, those seas of blue sadness with nothing to hide behind. And she also thinks in that moment how she's feeling so trapped. How could she feel lost, trapped in her own home? So tell me about that moment in the mirror. Did you guys have that moment? I know I've had a moment like that.
For sure. Definitely I've had it.
Yes, I've had it in a different way in different moments. But it's funny because you don't notice the changes until it's all of a sudden one day you're like, oh my God, my stomach isn't just, doesn't matter how many soul cycles I go to or how much gym or, whatever. And sometimes it's too much and people overdo it to get back to what you were. It's just not going to happen. You have to accept it. And I think, Sarah's struggling with that as well and we all do. So that for sure was something I've experienced. And
I think there's a deep fear. I don't know. I've had nightmares my whole life, unfortunately. They come and go, but there's a kind of a fear, I think many have felt that you don't know where you are. And that I felt like that it really fit with this. Sarah has that feeling of kind of she wakes up, she doesn't really know where she is or who she is. And that, I mean, I can definitely relate to that. I've moved around a lot.
Especially
you travel a lot. You kind of, sometimes you wake up, you don't really know.
And if you're like dreaming that you're your 25-year-old self and you wake up and you're like not, it's a shock in the mirror. You're like, oh, wait a minute. That's not who I am.
And even the fact that she could tell that her eyes looked sad. I feel like sometimes you can't tell that about yourself, but she could see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. I thought that was really cool.
For me, my cousin in Italy, my parents are Italian, she would always say to me that I had sad eyes, or, my, eyes sometimes showed sadness. So that came to me a little bit when I was writing that, because, my mother was a very difficult personality growing up, which is a little bit of why I'm interested in psychology so much. And so I think our eyes really, the whole experience of our lives are in your eyes, regardless.
So wait, I want to hear more about what you just said about your growing up. Can you tell? Do you want to talk any more about what?
Oh no, it's fine, because I've opened up a lot about it in the past few years, especially. But no, my mother was very mentally and sometimes physically abusive to both myself and my brother, more so to me. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that she never really grew up. She's almost very childlike, and we had to treat her more like the child than the parent. And my dad was kind and sweet, and he tried the best he could, but he couldn't really manage her so much. So she ended up being which is why I developed a love for books and stories, because I would read or go into the corner and, hopefully she wasn't in a bad mood today. And to this day, she's still that way. And so I've had to distance myself from her to protect myself. But
does she know that she's like that?
No. She's like mommy dearest, like something will trigger and then all of a sudden she goes off, and it could be anything and she'll never apologize, but it's been quite scary abusive things, like things she would say that would be just really awful. And so I learned to cope with that as a child. And then as an adult, it sort of helped me in ways in certain aspects of my life, because I was able to, nothing shocked me. No mean person at work or in my business could ever, anything they said, I never flinched, because it was nothing compared to what I dealt with as a child. And I think it also made me a better mother, because I'm totally 100% the opposite of what she would ever be. And so, but I think that sadness is always in me and in my, eyes or my voice or the way I even, relate in general to people sometimes because of it. And we all have something. Sarah had her trauma from her childhood. Tullan has her stuff that she deals with.
Let's go into Tullan stuff now. Let's just get it all on the table. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Did you have a similar experience growing up?
I lost my father young as a teenager, so that was, I would say that was a big trauma in my life. I moved around a lot, which was both beautiful in some ways as a family, but it was also hard. I changed schools many times. We moved to different countries, and it was very exciting in some ways, but also it's traumatic as a kid, I think, to all your friends, suddenly you're uprooted and moved, and it was like in first grade, and then in fifth grade, in fifth grade, and then in sixth grade, and then, so it's been many. And then my father passed away when I was 17, so then I realized that put a kind of for good and for bad too. It was so difficult at the time, but I also learned to really take advantage of the moment and my family, and I think with my mother and my sisters, we became very close. But it's something you just learn to live with it. It's not, I still miss him. And then I lost my mother last year, so it's been a year of while we were writing this, actually, it helped me, I must say. I sat up many nights, she was very sick at the end, and it helped me. I was also far away, and she lived in Italy, but it's part of life. We all have loss, but I think it's an easier way to connect then. And it's also, I think it's a beautiful way to connect then on a more deeper level.
Yeah. But you could feel it in this book. That's why I kept asking, is this from personal experience? Because I just felt like there was so much real, there was so much, it just felt too real to be complete fiction. As most novels come from some place, but still I'm not surprised to hear. Not that I wanted to hear it, but you could, I'm trying to say this in a positive way, that you could feel it in the book, that it felt very authentic, despite it being fiction. Okay. And I'm sorry it came from a place of pain, but...
No, and we also wanted, there's a fine line between, we all have maybe an infatuation with someone, or we sometimes don't know who we are, or so on. And then there's another level where it becomes a psychosis, but somewhere we can all connect, and we all have worries and dark things. And I think if we can understand each other better through, and that's the beauty of books, I think, in art in general,
I completely agree.
We can connect on a different level, and can be helpful too, to know that I'm not the only one feeling this way. I mean, I know in my growing up too, I asked a lot of questions always, even sometimes just in my mind or just reading too. It just really helps to know that there are other people that feel the same way.
I agree. That's the whole thing, is trying to make people feel not alone, right? I mean, that's the worst, is to feel such pain in whatever way and think it's just you.
Right.
Somehow it makes you feel better knowing that other people, it's like that you're not weird.
Exactly.
Whatever. I don't know.
Especially certain times of the year, like this, during this time of the year, it's, people feel much lonelier. And so you just really want, and sometimes what does that loneliness take you to? Who knows? So we wanted to really explore that part of it, and drawing upon, stuff that we've gone through was helpful for sure.
But we wanted it from her perspective, so it kind of is a small, especially in the beginning, it's a kind of a small world, and we did that on purpose. It's not a touristy version of New York or so on. It's how she sees
her daily life.
At the beginning, I was like, wait, I thought this was a thriller. Because I'm like, this is just like a scene out of my life. Like we're just like hanging out in the park and like walking up Fifth Avenue. Anyway, how did you both bring your other jobs into this? I want to hear a little more about your investigative background and being a producer. How did those lenses sort of inform the writing of this?
Well, for my investigative work, I do a lot of corporate investigations on fraud and due diligence and internal investigations and so on. And I think it's similar to the writing, I think, because it's about, well, like I mentioned, just questioning. Yeah. I'm always interested in how things work and of how people, and especially people, what makes people tick and why do people do things. And it's kind of similar, actually. You just have to get behind people's mind. And I love that. And I always put myself in the situation too. Like, what if this is me? How do I feel about this?
And also because Sarah had to become the investigator at one point, and to save herself. So we wanted, and that's helpful with Tullan's background and what the right questions to ask would be, and all of that. So because then it did become much more of an accelerated thriller at one point, when you realize something is awry. She realizes it at the same time we realize it as the reader. So, and we wanted that purposely so that the reader is on the same journey as Sarah completely. And, because of my background as a producer and film person, which I've been doing for quite a while, and fortunately and unfortunately, I was developing for about 6 years for the Weinstein Company, basically consulting on all their projects. And we wrote this at first as a screenplay, and it reads very cinematic in many ways. So I think we brought that structure to our writing, which helps a lot because we see things in scenes visually. And even though it's a literary experience, you as a reader always visualize. And so we want that experience even more. So as I think a film person, that helped a lot. And the structure is just kind of similar to writing a novel, actually, writing a screenplay. It's kind of the bones, and then you fill it all in with the rest.
I think that's how we worked together, because working in two, we thought through the whole story, kind of like a film, and then we took turns writing. So that's...
Did you do different chapters each, or how did you?
No, it was more organic. Like we could write for a big chunk, kind of. But we had the story together.
We knew what the twists were going to be, the plot points, and where we wanted them to happen. And then we filled in, her life and journey, but it was always going to the same place.
But
so
she took on her own life.
As we wrote.
You kind of create a character, and then they take off. Kind of. So that's the fun part of it. We set up the scene, let's say, and then we let her speak.
So are there plans for this to be a movie?
So yes. we've been working quite diligently on that. It was actually part of on the Weinstein slate before everything happened and that whole craziness, which was inevitable, and I'm happy it did happen the way it did. But so now we have it with our agent who's brought it to certain talent who's interested in it. And we'll have some news soon, hopefully. But yes, that it's either a film or it's a TV series, like a limited TV series. Yeah.
I feel like all the best things are limited now.
I know.
Like, who even wants a movie?
Because it's just a different world. Yeah. Nobody goes to the movies anymore like they used to. It's very rare. So.
And are you two planning on writing more books together?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you already doing one?
Yes, we are. We're deep into the second novel, which is also, a psychological thriller with elements of The Woman in the Park and about.
So sort of a parallel story, not exactly a sequel.
Right. So it'll all kind of.
The woman in the playground.
A woman on the beach.
Dog in the playground.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
a man on the reservoir.
This one, we have a little bit of an ensemble here, so there's more characters, which in their experience as friends, sometimes we think we know our friends and we think we know what's going on, and really we don't. And then it all culminates. We have them on a trip together, sort of like a summer trip before their kids go off to college.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. I can just follow this through my whole life. I'm just going to go through all the life stages.
As we get older.
Yeah, exactly. I'll come back to you in 20 years and be like, okay, I'm about to be a grandmother. I need a thriller about...
Grandmother on the cruise ship.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Do you have any advice to aspiring authors?
Well, I would say write and read a lot, and write what you like. Don't worry so much about what other people, but take yourself seriously, I think, in a good way, and find the joy and I think the way finds itself. I've always been writing and there were times I was very frustrated about it, but then it's kind of you just have to, no, I love this more than anything else, so I'm going to do it, either if one person reads it or no one.
Yep.
But this is really important to me, and then I think the ways kind of open up somehow.
And I would say read a lot of your genre that you're going to write, because that just trains your brain to write that way. And also go to places like BookCon and these conventions and meet people, because in meeting people that are in the industry, they can always help you to get to that next level as you're writing and doing your craft as best you can. Because there's a lot of room for a lot of voices and stories out there. And I think don't give up on I'm never going to get it done, blah, blah, blah. Just really try.
Excellent. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for coming and sharing your own experiences.
Thank you.
Writing the book. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, the award-winning podcast. Today's episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books was sponsored by Pediatrician in Your Pocket by Dr. Jennifer Trachtenberg, dr-jen.com. Enter code PIP20, PIP20, for 20% off of these can't-miss modules that will make your parenting life so much easier. You can follow me on Instagram at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music. Thanks for listening. You could always email me at zibby@zibbyowens.com.